Just as I was starting to bike around the city last summer, one of my favorite YouTube channels, Oh the Urbanity, made a video showcasing a bike trip to the IKEA in Ottawa. We have an IKEA here in Halifax, but it's not exactly centrally located. It lives in Dartmouth Crossing, a power center more than 10 kilometers north of the downtown. So I was surprised when the video showed that Canada's IKEAs had been ranked for bikeability, and Halifax did okay? Average? So I thought making a similar trip would be a fun way to explore parts of the city's bike network that I don't actually tend to access all that often in my day-to-day commutes. In today's video, I'll be heading from the Central Library downtown to the IKEA in Dartmouth Crossing. As always, I'll be playing a game of +1 -2 along the way. Every time I encounter something that makes my trip safer or more convenient, I'll add a point, and every time I encounter something that makes it less safe or less convenient, I'll take away 2 points. You can keep track of how I think the ride is going by looking at the heads-up display in the bottom right-hand corner. First up, merging into traffic from the bike path next to the library is relatively straightforward. There's a gap in the bike network between the path I just left and the Brunswick Street painted bike lanes I'm heading to now. These are the Brunswick Street painted bike lanes, and they make it easier to navigate through this section of the city. Unless it's being used as a loading zone or people are moving through it to park on the other side. These lanes are a door zone design, so they're about 1.5 meters across, and to avoid getting hit by somebody opening their door on my right, I need to stay about 1 meter away from the cars, which means I'm going to be mostly riding pretty close to the line, which then annoys people driving in the lane to my left. So I don't really have a good way of winning here. These are better than nothing, but eh. This is a pretty common failure to yield scenario. Drivers frequently don't check bike lanes for oncoming traffic, and so I have to pump my brakes to avoid running into them. On the upside, the lanes do cover a major road, which makes them very useful, and offer a lot of useful connections to the downtown on my right. This intersection is a mess. I could probably filter my way past this truck to make the light, but I've got them stuck here trying to make it past pedestrians. I've got the unobservant driver on my left. I'm just going to hang back and not make the situation worse. At least one of these people is probably going to try to run a red light. Merging back into traffic at the end of the lane is easy enough. You do just get dumped into open traffic though, which is not ideal. This lane could totally just continue. This car is playing super loud Celtic music, and I'm going to award it a point because I think that's great. You can't stop me. It's really minimal and it's just by this school, but that's technically a widened shoulder, so I'm going to have to give it a point for traffic calming. Also, a point for the generally good paving. There's no major potholes, so Brunswick Street is good for paving. I now have to take this ramp down to Barrington so that I can take the bike ramp up to the bridge. Lame. The turn onto the bike ramp is extremely tight. Once you pass the bus stop, the entire ramp and bikeway is bike only all the way to Dartmouth, so there won't be any pedestrians. The ramp isn't horrendously steep, but it is a little on the steep side. It's about a 10% grade on the way up. The ramp is super useful because hills can actually be pretty dangerous for bikes, because they can't keep pace with cars going up them. It's nicely paved, and it's wide enough for bikes to be going up and down to pass each other without issue. This is a McDonald Bridge bikeway. It keeps me fully separated from traffic while allowing me to make use of the bridge, so it's super useful. It's bidirectional, but wide enough to allow multiple cyclists to pass each other easily. The entire bridge bikeway is well paved because, well, it's a bridge, but a really big draw is actually just the views. It's nice to bike across. The only real downside to crossing the harbour by bike is that the pylons can create a bit of a visual obstruction, so you can't see past them and have to slow down, but that's pretty minor. Any piece of bike infrastructure that runs for more than a kilometer gets a bonus point for me. The bridge is pretty seamlessly integrated into the Dartmouth side of the bike network. The entire intersection is fitted with crossrides and bike lights to make navigating it easier on bike. The light cycles can be really long though. These are the Weiss Road protected bike lanes. They keep me completely separate from traffic and allow me to navigate along a major roadway. The lanes are one direction on each side of the street, but there's plenty of space for passing. The lanes end at Thistle, but you can actually use the turn box to make a left turn onto the Dartmouth Commons. Or you could if the signal had ever actually been installed. It's currently covered by a trash bag, and so you can just dismount and walk like a pedestrian. This is the Dartmouth Commons. It provides a multi-use path that's going to keep me out of traffic as I continue moving north. There can be a lot of pedestrian and bike traffic through here, but in general the paths are wide enough to accommodate everyone. The paths are pretty well paved, and in general the entire park is really nice to bike through. From here, a series of crossrides provide an easy transition onto the Dahlia Bikeway. Sharrows are useless on their own, but I do like them on bikeways as a reminder to look out for bikes. The entire bikeway was redone during the summer and fall of last year, so the paving is fresh, there's some new bumped out shoulders, and there's some speed bumps to slow down traffic. The main weakness of the bikeway is the number of stops that you have to make at intersecting streets for how short it is. The crossrides at the end of the bikeway provide a smooth transition onto the multi-use paths lining Sullivan's Pond and later on up to Lake Bannock. This multi-use path is going to keep me out of traffic as I make my way to the north end of the lake. This crossing is a mandatory dismount, and I don't think that's necessary. This could probably just be a yield sign. Also, failure to yield. +1 for a cool bridge. This is Lake Bannock, and the multi-use path is going to let me cover a major roadway. It's well paved and honestly just really scenic. It's a nice place to bike through if you're doing a commute in this area. Also, and this will probably sound silly, but there are guardrails and they're on the right side of the trail. Pedestrian traffic on the trail can be pretty heavy, but today isn't too bad, so I won't be taking any points off. The trail just kind of dumps you into a parking lot. If you didn't know it kept going on the other side, you might just think this is where it ends. It's not great wayfinding. Even with heavy pedestrian and bike traffic, the trail is generally wide enough to navigate around. Amazing bridge is amazing! So, I kind of have mixed feelings about this section. There's a giant concrete slab that acts as a ramp that connects up to local streets, but it's not really part of the official bike network. The trail continues to my left, but I need to use this ramp to get to the streets. But it's not really a ramp, it's just a weird concrete slab. So, I guess +1 for the weird slab thing? I guess? Counting from where their multi-use path first started at Sullivan's Pond, this whole thing gets about a 2 kilometers worth of distance bonus. Here I'm just dumped onto the street without any bike infrastructure. This is just a local street, but I am about to merge into a major collector. So this is a little weird. There's what looks like a multi-use path off to my right. It doesn't show up on the city's bike network map, and so I'm not sure that I can actually bike on it, and it comes from a sidewalk and just leads to another sidewalk, and theoretically I would have to dismount at each of the road crossings. So I'm just going to stick to the road because it's such a short stretch, but thanks for the multi-use path. If you stick to the rightmost lane on Micmac Boulevard, then you can make a wide left turn onto the Shubie Trail without any traffic conflicts, just as an FYI. This is the Shubie Canal Greenway, and it's going to get me most of the rest of the way to IKEA. There's a relatively smooth transition off the roadway, although that's mostly true in the outbound direction and less so in the inbound direction on the return trip. I'm going to be completely separated from traffic, and it's really useful because it actually mirrors Highway 118. There are some downsides to the Shubie Greenway that I think do detract from it. They all kind of fall under the header of this is primarily a recreational trail as opposed to a dedicated commuter path. And what I mean by that is that the trail is kind of windy, hilly, and pretty narrow compared to most of the other multi-use paths in the city. And combining that with the relatively high level of pedestrian and cyclist traffic and the fact that the trail isn't paved, it's packed gravel, and actually in some places kind of loose gravel, you end up having to go through this area at a pretty slow speed, which is not ideal if you're trying to get between point A and point B. All the creeks and streams are covered by bridges, and they're very smooth and easy to roll over. I will say this is a really nice place to bike through, especially during the summer and late spring. Astute geographers might have noticed that Dartmouth Crossing is actually on the other side of Highway 118 from the Greenway, and might be wondering how exactly we're supposed to get there from here. And the answer is a giant ramp. The ramp has about a 6.5% grade, so most people are going to be able to bike up it without any issue. And there are guardrails along all the sides, so you're not going to accidentally fall off somehow. This is technically not a cross ride as far as I'm aware, and so I do have to dismount across. Boo. This bridge will take me over Highway 118 and all of its on and off ramps. And this ramp will take me back down to street level at Shubie Drive. That's the end of the multi-use path, and so I'm on road pretty much the entire rest of the way from here. So I'll go ahead and give the Shubie Trail all of its distance bonuses, which is 3 kilometers worth. There's a smooth transition from the path onto Shubie Drive, but I am just being dumped into traffic. So I'm in Dartmouth Crossing, and the first thing you might notice is that the roads are really, really wide. This is Shubie Drive, and it's theoretically classified as a local street. At this point, it's now 5 lanes wide, which is about as wide as Robie Street on the peninsula gets at its absolute widest. That's kind of nuts, and it's not great if you're on a bike. Compared to the other parts of the city where I've made these types of videos on, Dartmouth Crossing is a little different. There's only the thinnest of pretexts that anyone would be in Dartmouth Crossing and not be in a car. This is kind of forced from the land use, just because everything is very far away from everything else, that a car is the only convenient way to get around Dartmouth Crossing. But you can kind of tell just from the number of pedestrians that we've seen so far while I've been here, and it's zero. There hasn't been a single pedestrian on the sidewalks. And spoiler alert, there won't be any pedestrians for the rest of the video. This kind of lack of consideration for anyone not in a car actually carries over into bike infrastructure, which there actually is bike infrastructure in Dartmouth Crossing. Off to my left, there's a multi-use path that theoretically would be very useful for me to climb up this hill on Findlay Drive. The issue is that I don't actually have a way of legally accessing that multi-use path. It doesn't connect to anything, and there's no way for me to get to it. So thanks for the multi-use path, but I can't get into it. And if I did get into it, it doesn't take me anywhere. So, bad planning? Also, at least one of those cars was a close pass. -2. At least there's plenty of bike parking. As a quick summary, the trip out to IKEA from downtown covered about 13.5 kilometers and took about 40 minutes. I was able to spend the vast majority of the trip either completely separated from traffic or on low traffic bikeways. On the way, I ducked into significant traffic on Micmac Boulevard for a short stretch, but by far the most stressful section of the trip was towards the end. Dartmouth Crossing is hostile to anyone not in a car, and this represents a significant barrier to getting there by bike. This is a shame, because most of the path there from downtown is relatively low stress. If that last stretch seemed intimidating, maybe just hop on the sidewalk. There won't be any pedestrians anyways, just because of the nature of the place. Normally, this is where the video would fade to black, but I wanted to address a local urban legend that there's a secret tunnel from the Shubie Greenway that allows pedestrians and cyclists to bypass the worst of Dartmouth Crossing and get to IKEA. Let's reload the map at the ramp, and I'm going to head a few kilometers north and try to see if I can find this supposed tunnel, just so that we can put this myth to rest. It looks like the path actually splits off here. This trail isn't exactly navigable by bike, at least not easily. Well, when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Let's see where this tunnel goes. Wait, but this is the south end. This is just a few blocks away from where I started. That can't be right. If you were earnestly wondering if this tunnel can be used to get to IKEA, the short answer is not really. It does technically lead out to the other side of Highway 118, and you can climb up a pretty steep vertical climb up to the road to eventually reach IKEA. You end up about a couple kilometers north of it. The issue is that that climb is pretty brutal, and if you're carrying stuff, especially if you're trying to go back, it's mostly not going to be viable. So I would maybe, if you're concerned about getting around Dartmouth Crossing, just go for the sidewalks. That's it for this week. As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.